morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Good to see you all.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Looking like Londoners.
Oh, yeah,
It suits you.
We've been able to speak like that now.
Some of us are Londoners now. So.
You're already Londoners.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Colleagues, good morning. And thank you for making the time to engage the President on his state visit to the UK. Mr. President, the format you're going to take, each colleague will ask 2 questions. We will respond. We have
You didn't give me a
ENCA.
note. You didn't give me a
Yes,
note.
brother. Can you see the President?
We'll get the
Yes,
report.
can you see the President?
We have ENCA.
Yes.
We have CNBC. We have Newsroom Africa, SABC,
Oh, okay,
Sunday Times. Those are the colleagues we have, and AFP. Okay, Mzande,
Just say something.
say something. Okay,
Just
we'll
before
give,
the President.
we'll give the first question to all of them. Is that okay?
Yes, we're ready. Okay, sure. No, I'm ready.
You're ready? Okay.
Can I get a pen? Please. No, I want that one. This one is better.
Pull ahead that one then. Okay, Mzande,
Yes.
the first 2 questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We, obviously, as the SAPC, would also like to have a bite at posing our own questions around your state visit. Mr. President, you come to the UK when the country really is battling with energy at home, and you did touch on those areas when you were addressing businesses. But then there's a sense at home that their president is running away from dealing with the issues at home, so he's always on the road. So how do you respond to those critics who are saying instead of focusing, staying at home and dealing with the issues that are of utmost importance, you get onto the plane, onto the next destination? And then my second question, yes, you're the head of state, Mr. President, but there's a vehicle that takes you there, which is your party. So unfortunately, we can't not ask about it. So 2 days ago, we saw some of the official nominations. It appears that you have the majority of branch nominations. So what does that say? So does that mean you certainly are taking the second term if elected by the ANC in less than a month? Thank you.
My visits to a number of countries to either go on state visits as well as attending various forums like the G20 and COP27 were well announced in advance. We made it a point that we should inform the country that these were visits that are going to take place. When I went to the UN, we then came to the UK for the burial of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and after that we had moved to a higher level of load shedding, and I shortened my trip and I went back home to attend to the challenges that we face, and I've done that on 2 occasions. I was heavily criticized for coming back home, and why do I abandon visits that could benefit South Africa? And this time round, this visit to the UK was well known and well announced. And even as I left, we were having the challenge of increased load shedding, and it had to do with diesel shortage, financial challenges, which I am continuously attending to with ministers. I have ministers whose job is to address these issues, and once we've got the framework, such as the one that we put in place to address our energy challenges, ministers as well as the executives of those entities are meant to address that. And I remain in constant contact up to 3-4 times a day, being informed on what is happening and putting forward proposals and taking decisions. So much as I want to be present in the country all the time to address all the challenges that we have, there are times when we've got to also get those who are supposed to do the work themselves. And I then do other work, which is put South Africa on the global map and advocate for increased investments in our country. That is the job that a head of state must do, supported by ministers. And I brought together 4 ministers here, and we've all been involved in a variety of actions and interventions to promote investment in the country, to put South Africa on not only the UK map, but the global map, because this type of state visit is, if you like, beamed across the world, and this is a place where a number of investors are present, and in the end, the UK still represents the biggest foreign direct investors into South Africa. So we've got to talk to them. We've got to get them further interested in our country and invest more, and also participate in our transformation process. And that message is an important message to put across to them. But the other important one was to also tell them about our just energy transition, but also to inform them that we need more funding, particularly for your more developed economy countries, that they must live up to the commitments they made in Paris. They must also live up to the commitments they made at COP26. And now the recent move that developing economy countries are making is that there should be compensation for damage that has been done to our climate. Coming to the ANC process, that is a transparent ANC process that everyone has been aware of. And as for me, I'm humbled and truly honored by those branches that have indicated their support. And I was asked by the Electoral Committee whether I accept the nomination. I said yes, I humbly accept the nomination. And in the end, it is not for me to decide. It is for the branches and the delegates who will come to the conference. And let's leave the decision to the delegates who are mandated by branches to take the final decision. Thank you.
Amanda?
Mr. President, how are you? My name is Amanda Koz. I'm from the Sunday Times. I'm a presidency correspondent. I just want to follow up on my colleague's question about the ANC, and that would be, why do you think that you deserve a second term? And could the President take us into your meeting with the Prime Minister insofar as what did you discuss and how are you going to follow up on these agreements and make sure that what they committed to, they will do? Thank you, Mr. President.
Why do I deserve a second term? I think that should be a question that should be really asked to the delegates, because they are the ones who have nominated me. But as for me, I think what we've been doing in the past few years is to build a foundation to rebuild our country. When we came in, a lot of things were damaged. Things were not working as well as they should. A number of our institutions had been captured, as was evidence in the Zondo Commission, and a number of reforms needed to be embarked upon at the economic level. But this is a task that we've been involved in. But in the intervening period, as we all know, we had a number of other new challenges like COVID-19, the unrest, the floods, and all these interrupted the processes that we had wanted to embark upon to reposition South Africa But I do believe that a great deal of work has been done of a preparatory nature, consolidating the foundation and preparing us for exciting opportunities that are going to be on offer, which we are ready to take up. Our economy is currently challenged, and the unemployment that we are going through now was exacerbated by COVID-19. 2 million people who lost their jobs during COVID. For an economy as small as ours to lose 2 million jobs in a short space of time of 18 months is a huge, huge disaster. So we have to rebuild from that. We've got to rebuild our institutions, which we are doing. The reforms that we have embarked upon are recognized and are appreciated by a number of key role players, particularly those who invest both internally and externally. They recognize that we are on a path to reform, to introduce reforms in our economy. We are addressing issues that have to do with corruption, criminality, and all that work in my book is positive work that is consolidating a very good foundation for South Africa to be repositioned. We are attending to infrastructure built and really getting ready so that more and more infrastructure projects can get off the ground. Because one of the challenges that we face is just project preparedness. We found that there are serious weaknesses at the level of just preparing projects and getting projects to get off the ground. So that sterling performance that we had moving towards 2010 is what we want to bring back. We lost a lot of skilled people, lots of engineers have left, and we are now building new skills with young people coming to the fore, but we've got to consolidate all that work. So in the coming period, I think we are poised for much better growth and great opportunities that we can take up. And the good thing is a number of key role players, both internationally and internally, are seeing the changes. Some people say, it's been slow, we've not been moving fast enough. And of course, everybody wants everything to move very quickly. In fact, they wanted to move yesterday. But some things have had to be put in place so that when we do take off, it becomes a meaningful takeoff. For instance, people have been complaining that there are no prosecutions, people who have been complicit in wrongdoing during state capture, nothing is being done to them. And I've been saying, wait and see. Processes are underway, and now it is beginning to happen. So the great opportunities await South Africa going forward. As regards the meetings that we had with the Prime Minister, we had a really great meeting with the Prime Minister. I had a tete-a-tete with him first, and we touched on a number of important issues that have to do with the relationship between the United Kingdom and South Africa. In our working lunch, we touched on issues of trade, of investment, of the just energy transition, and we put our message across very strongly that we want investments to be upgraded and more and more British companies to invest in our country. That message was well received, and we saw evidence of that when we went to the Business Forum, because at the Business Forum a number of British company CEOs said, we're going to be investing more money in energy, in infrastructure, and we're prepared to work with South African companies. And some of them even added a very wonderful element that we're also focusing on community development, where we are invested, to focus on how we can support the communities where our companies operate. So that for me was very positive. On the trade side, we said we want to see increased trade between South Africa and the UK. We sell manufactured products like vehicles, but we also stressed that there are constraints on a number of items such as wine. We want to sell more wine to the UK, and I characterize that is a very happy item that should make everybody happy in the UK. So we want more wine to be brought to the UK. The quota needs to be doubled. We want to bring more sugar to the UK, and the quota should also be doubled. And canned fruit. We've got canned fruit manufacturing companies in South Africa that are struggling right now. So with increased quota on canned fruit, we will be able to export more. So we articulated that viewpoint, and of course, we want the just energy transition, which the UK is a part of, to be underpinned by increased grants. We calculated the grant component of the $8.5 billion, and we said it only amounts to 2.7%, and we'd like that to be upgraded, largely due to the fact that South Africa already carries a huge debt burden, and the just energy transition should be a transition that is going to ensure that we address the challenges that workers are going to face and the challenges that communities where our fossil fuel generating power stations are, as we transition from those power stations into renewable energy, and as we build new industries, and as we create new and new jobs in those industries, in the hydrogen economy or sector, in the electric vehicle sector, as well as in the just renewable energy generation. So we see great opportunities here. The UK have told us that in years to come, they are actually going to ban petrol and diesel vehicles, and we want to be there to produce electric vehicles that can be exported to the UK. Already we bring delivery vehicles to the UK. We want to go into other vehicles as well. So it's been a very good visit from our point of view in terms of improving the relationship between the UK and South Africa. It's been most beneficial, and it has consolidated the foundation that was felt built by Nelson Mandela when he came here in 1996.
Mr. President, Ollie Barrett from ENCA. Obviously, energy has been a key focus. Can you point that the South that will come to fruition further down the line?
Yes, there is almost immediate follow-through. We had an opportunity to have discussions with companies that are already invested in the energy sector in South Africa, and others who want to come and invest. There's a company that is going to be investing almost £13 billion into renewable energy construction in South Africa, and they have already started, and they just participated in the recent bid window, and they've been successful, and they are now going to start their construction process. They did come to our investment conference, I think, this year, and they will be participating in the next year's investment conference. It is in renewable energy where we are seeing quite a lot of growth. But interestingly, other companies want to participate in the green and hydrogen sector, which they see South Africa playing a very big and critical role. And we have identified that in our business plan on the just energy transition as one of the key sectors. We've got all the natural resources that will boost our capability in that regard. So we are going to see investments, even flowing from just this visit, coming into South Africa. And of course, investments don't happen next week. You plant the seed and then it germinates, and thereafter we will see the growth. But I'm very confident, and let me say that we never for 1 minute had any business person being negatively disposed towards South Africa, and we never for any minute had even any politician being negative towards South Africa. All we've received here is great positivity from His Majesty the King himself, who is very strong on environmental issues and climate change, right through to everyone else that we've been engaging with. So there'll be great benefits to the people of our country flowing from this visit.
Mr. President, Arabile Kumete, CNBC. It was around this time in 2014 when the former president asked you to basically take charge of Eskom and try to find a solution for it. It's close to 7 years now, and unfortunately still no resolution in that regard. Is there something you can point towards exactly as to why that is still the case and why it hasn't been resolved thus far? That would be question one. And then the second one would relate to how, the UK company is investing about £5.37 billion over a 3-year period at the very least now. That's the commitment that has been made. How much of that would go to the electricity infrastructure, and how critical is it to prioritize that at a time like this?
My involvement with the whole Eskom process started in 2014 when I was asked by the then president to head the war room. And in the course of doing all that, we were getting reports from the management in Eskom, and there came a time when I actually said the process of the war room is best closed down, so that we have a CEO in Eskom who will be directly involved in helping to address the challenges at Eskom. And it is myself who proposed that the war room should be closed, because the war room in many ways had too many entry points. Everyone was trying to put their fingers in and trying to resolve the problems, and I realized that it just doesn't work. You needed one entry point, and that had to be the CEO. And it was to that, for that reason, that I even suggested that Brian Molefe should be appointed the CEO. And I did say that at the State Capture Commission, because I did believe that his capabilities would help to address the challenges. But little did I know that he was entangled in a whole number of other things. And this has been the case with Eskom, because Eskom's problems did not start yesterday or even 7 years ago. Eskom's problems started way back. There was a time when the Eskom management wanted to build new power stations, and they were told that no, don't. The power stations will be built by the private sector, and you just keep the lights on. And at that time, maintenance was also stopped. And I met a person who used to be a manager in Eskom who said they were stopped from maintaining, serious maintenance for 12 years. So you had a period of 12 years where no maintenance was done, and the power stations were driven hard, and the instruction was keep the lights on. And no wonder today we are reaping the whirlwind, because a number of errors were committed. So that is why I keep saying Eskom's woes and problems did not start even in 2014. They started way earlier, and you will need to go back 7 years or more. And because you're dealing with huge machinery that costs billions to put in place, you need all the skills, you need all the capability, and because these are machines, it's almost like your car. Your car cannot be run forever in a day and years without being serviced, because if you do that, it will break down. So it's the time-based process. You need to stop the car, have it properly serviced, and move, stop it again, have it properly serviced. We didn't have that. And when the decision was then taken to build new power stations, those people who used to be well adept, who had the experience to build power stations within Eskom, they had left because they'd been told that we're not building power stations anymore, so they had left. So what you were then left with is outsiders, original equipment manufacturers, who were not daily involved with the workings of Eskom in terms of processes, either procurement or performance, who came in, built the power stations. And now we have design problems that have come to the fore that are a big challenge at the new power stations that we had built, which we had hoped would be our savior, as it were. So we are dealing with a combination of problems, and we are now trying to fix the plane as it is flying. As we are generating electricity, power stations keep breaking, many of them are old, but we are trying with a new board and with the management that's in place to address this problem. So the problems of Eskom were seeds that were planted many years ago, rather than in 2014. And because we're dealing with huge, complicated and complex machinery, it's not a one-day fix. It can never be. These are very complex processes, but we are working to lessen the load shedding and to ensure that the money is there. And remember, Eskom, which used to be the best utility in the world, through the neglect, the state capture missteps and mistakes, has been reduced to an entity that has a huge debt burden, cannot really fully collect from consumers, and so it's dealing with a multiplicity of problems all at the same time. Do I have confidence that we will solve these problems? Yes, I do. I do have enormous confidence that we will solve them. But I think it's important to have an appreciation of where we've come from. And obviously it is very easy to put all the blame on the president, to put all the blame on government, and yet these problems have come way back from the past.
Governor?
Thank you, Mr. President. It's Govin Whittles from Newsroom Africa. At the South Africa House, you said that the state visit would be underpinned by the need to secure investment to directly address South Africa's economic challenges. The Prime Minister's office pointed to 2 new bilateral agreements which you guys have concluded, and we know that there is the green hydrogen grant which has been announced by the UK government. How much does South Africa want from the UK government in grant format for that green hydrogen grant, and what are these agreements? And then this week in South Africa, 2 issues emanating from the courts. One, the killer of Chris Hani, our liberation hero, was granted parole, Janusz Walusz. At the same time, the court ruled that the granting of medical parole to the former president was unlawful. What did you think about the decision to grant the killer of Chris Hani parole? And you're concerned that the decision on the former president has potential to lead to unrest again in our country?
How much do we want from the British government? We've always said that the more industrialized countries were and have been the greatest polluters, and those who have damage the climate much more than your developing economy countries. For instance, Africa has just been responsible for 1%, and our approach is that the polluter must pay. And that is why we are advocating for the approach that says there must be compensation for loss and damage. But having said that, we're also saying that your more developed economies must, in the end, live up to the commitments that they have made in the past. Paris COP is one example where they pledged $100 billion a year, which they never lived up to, and they also admit that. They are now striking agreements for just energy transition with a number of countries, and our agreement was a trailblazing one. And as we analyzed that agreement, we found that the grant portion of what they've put on the table is, as I said, amounts to 2.7%. We would like that portion of the grant to be lifted. We've had discussions with one of the European countries, and they're prepared to take it to 25% of what they've put forward. And we think a 25% mark would be a good one as a grant, which would then enable us to embark on a just transition process with greater confidence, knowing that we've got partners who are serious about implementing the commitments that they made, particularly to address the loss and damage aspect, and also to be our partners also as we look at the loan structures, offerings rather, that they are putting forward, concessional loans which would come in at really good and low interest rates, and which would be stretched over a period that our economies can afford and absorb. With regard to the judgment on Walus, it is disappointing, I must say, very, very disappointing, because Chris Hani was an iconic figure in our struggle. And in fact, if you look at it more carefully, it was our democracy in the end, as we even attained an election date, was pivoted on the tragedy that our country went through when Chris Hani was killed. So you could say that Chris Hani's death was part of what spawned the democracy that we have, and it is unfortunate. But I haven't looked at the judgment closely myself. I would like to do so and to see the reasoning. And one cannot but feel the pain that the family and his widow, Dimpho Hani, is going through. And I haven't had a discussion with her as yet and the family, but one feels the heavy pain and the burden that has now been thrust on her shoulders and the family's shoulders. With regard to the judgment on the parole decision, the medical parole decision that was judged upon by the court, I do believe that the Department of Correctional Services is going to want to appeal that decision, and I think we should allow that process. I do not believe that we should see any unrest through this, because there are other processes that will ensue, and the period of that whole sentence, in my view, as I've heard, seems to have already run out. So the court has made its decision in this regard, and the Department of Correctional Services, and looking at the judgment, has seen reason to want to appeal. And I think we should allow those legal processes to ensue, and we'll see what happens thereafter.
Mosi?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mr. President. Two memorandums of understanding in terms of health and education were signed yesterday Can you give us some detail in terms of what are the practical programs you're expecting to come out of that? That's my first question. The second one is you have been lamenting for the longest time the effect of Zimbabwe immigration on South Africa and the lifting of sanctions against Zimbabwe and the engagement within the Commonwealth. Did you have that discussion with the King and the Prime Minister, and what was the response to that?
Yes, on the health and education, we did sign two memoranda that are going to enable the UK and South Africa to work at close range on health matters. And the memoranda were signed in the wake of the visit that I had to the Crick Institute, which is an outstanding research institute. But in my view, it becomes outstanding because there are South Africans who are also working there, who are either learning as students or working there. And for me, it was a joy to see young people from South Africa, from the deep rural areas of our country, excelling and working on processes, including products, medical products like accessible microscopes and affordable microscopes that they are developing and hopefully will be made available not only to South Africa but to the world. So the research cooperation at that level, which was also underpinned by the Memorandum of Understanding, was for me a great highlight for the visit that we had. And on the education side, we had come to the UK also with a clear proposal that we would like to deepen the cooperation at the education level, the skills level, to have more South African students being given assistance and support to come and learn here. As it is now, we have a program in which 130 PhD South African students or candidates are participating in. When we had a discussion with the Prime Minister, we said we want that to be doubled. We want 260 PhD students to be supported, and many more at the master's program level. So the cooperation between our two countries is largely at the practical level. It's no longer just at the theoretical level. It's at the practical level where we explore ways in which universities here and colleges here can participate in this program and advance their educational prowess and outcomes for our young people. The Zimbabwe issue inevitably always comes up in meetings like this because we're talking here with the country that is like at the head of the Commonwealth, and we advocate for Zimbabwe to be readmitted to the Commonwealth. It's important, and obviously they're going to mull over that. We also advocate for sanctions to be lifted, and we've argued that the sanctions that have been imposed on Zimbabwe have a collateral impact, a negative impact on us as South Africa, because as the Zimbabwean economy is weakened, Zimbabweans flow to our own country and exacerbate the challenges that we are having with regard to unemployment and health services and many other services. So yes, the issue did come up, and these are matters that are continuing to be addressed.
Helen?
Hello, Agence France Press. Good morning, Mr. President. In the context of UK-South Africa relations, did King Charles share his vision of the Commonwealth with you? And linked to that, in 2022, is the Commonwealth still relevant to the people of South Africa? And also, could you talk a bit more about the highlights of the trip for you, please?
Yes, when I had a number of conversations with the King, which happened in between what we were doing, either around a meal table or sitting down to chat, and even as he spoke at the state banquet, I got a very clear distinction of his vision for the Commonwealth. I did not attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda, but what I did hear from those who attended, he articulated very clearly the vision that he has. And the vision is pivoted around what I believe is an important statement, where he says we must acknowledge the wrongs of the past. We must acknowledge that horrible and wrong things were done in the past, and it is only when we acknowledge that we are better positioned to build a better future that can benefit all. That for me was and is an important statement, because it is when people acknowledge their history, their past, and are honest to deal with that we are able to come up with solutions that can open up new opportunities. And in my discussions with the King, I found him engaging, I found him open, and I found him as a visionary, particularly on development issues, on issues that have to do with education, on issues that have to do with the environment and climate change. I was quite impressed with his disposition towards these issues, and did say that as a head of the Commonwealth, these are important issues that he needs to continue advocating, which then brings the issue of the relevance of the Commonwealth. And I do believe that when the Commonwealth rallies around important issues that impact on the lives of ordinary people, contemporary issues such as poverty, such as unemployment and inequality that is widespread in many countries of the Commonwealth, other than those who are part of the developed economy countries in the Commonwealth, it is then going to stand the Commonwealth in good stead. And as he himself looks at issues such as the environment, things like fisheries, things like island states, the challenges that they face, that in itself is going to make the Commonwealth relevant. And it's, in my view, good to have a head of the Commonwealth who continues to build on the foundation that Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II was able to build on, and he will take that forward. So I think it is an important aspect that one needs to recognize about the Commonwealth.
The President only forgot to ask his second question, so we'll give him the...
And then the last.
Highlights.
Oh yes, the highlights. Oh yes, you asked about the highlights. I just wrote here high, and I didn't know what high meant. Yes, there have been a number of highlights. I think the key one is just that a visit like this helps to consolidate and lift the importance of the relationship between the UK and South Africa. It is when I think all key role players, be they business, be they cultural workers or artists and everyone else, see that there are good relations between the two countries, that they are then able themselves to go for great opportunities. So it is important that relations between nations should be consolidated and lifted to a higher level. At the economic level, which was really the heart of our visit here, we were able, one, to interact with government to get their commitment on the just energy transition, two, to look at trade issues, and get their positive disposition, though we are still going to get involved in further talks. And 3, on investment, the government continues to see South Africa as the gateway into the African continent, not by sheer positioning at the tip of the continent, but also in terms of what we have to offer. We're the most industrialized country on the continent. We have all the wonderful attributes, a good financial system. We've got a manufacturing base which companies can invest in to be able to use South Africa as a launchpad for products that can be sold into the rest of the continent. So we've got all that it takes to do good business, not only with South Africa but with the rest of the continent. And I think the third one for me was the education one. The education one, where the UK continues to play an important role in education cooperation between the two countries, and also just getting more opportunities for our young people to come and learn here is important. The fourth one is the health and research aspect. We cooperated very well during COVID, although we had a bit of a hiccup with Omicron. But in the main, we have benefited a great deal from cooperating with the UK from a research point of view. I would say the fifth one was in an unexpected area, which is I would call it environmental issues, but particularly when we went to the Kew Gardens on the horticultural side of things, where we were able to see how our own students are studying at the Kew Gardens Institute or Learning Center about plants, about conserving and preserving plants. And we got to hear that plants that were taken from, seeds that were taken from South Africa 200 years ago, that were captured from the Dutch and ended up in the UK and preserved in a fairly sort of ordinary way, were found in a pouch, and they were replanted and they germinated. So 200 years of plants from South Africa were replanted here. But the real cherry on top is that through cooperation with Kew Gardens, we are now setting up our own seed bank where we will have the capability to store our seeds, to ensure that plants that are threatened with extinction are preserved for posterity. And this is born out of the relationship between South Africa and the UK, particularly our Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens and Kew Gardens, the relationship that has spanned more than 100 years, but more specifically, real good cooperation over 25 years. So those, for me, were the key highlights. And of course, the sixth one is to open up the gateways for tourism to be taken to another level between the UK and South Africa. And of course, at the trade level, if you really like this aspect, is that we could see more wines from South Africa being brought here. So that will give many people their happy hour when more wine is brought to the UK.
Okay,
Mr. President, Ollie Barrett from ENCA again. I just wondered if you could briefly characterise the personal rapport you found with the King, with the Prime Minister, and with Keir Starmer as well, who I think I heard you say you'd left your vote for him in his constituency. was that an endorsement?
Well, with Keir Starmer, we had a meeting, a wonderful meeting with the leader of the opposition, the Labour Party, and as you well know, taking putting on my party hat. The Labour Party and the ANC have historical links, a long, mutually beneficial relationship. So I wished him well in whatever process that they will get involved in. And yes, I said, I left my vote there for him. So he must go look for the vote because we went to his constituency. The personal rapport with all three, as you correctly say, is very warm, very positive, and very engaging as well. Starting off with His Majesty the King. I had met the King on a number of occasions, either when he came to South Africa or when we were here, particularly during the last Commonwealth meeting, Heads of State meeting that was held here. So we've had exchanges, and I'm a great admirer for the work that he has been doing. And as I said at the dinner, that he's been like a lone voice over many years on environmental issues and climate change. And now the world has awakened to the type of message that he has been putting across. So the rapport and the engagement between the two of us is at a good level. And with the Prime Minister as well, we had wonderful discussions. And I had met him at one of the global meetings. I think it was at COP27. So that is good. So on the whole, and I guess relationships are often really sort of the real test of whether there'll be really good relationships between nations. So at a personal level, I've been able to relate to all of them, and I do relate to all of them. And but more importantly, for the people in business, as people in Parliament as well. So it's been a very fulfilling for all of us who have been on this visit, ministers, myself, and our officials. It's been a very fulfilling visit, and I must say that this visit was well organized, so well planned, and the planning started way before even when Her Majesty the King was, the Queen rather, was still alive. They had started planning for this visit, and we were truly honored that His Majesty the King was willing to take it forward even after the passing of Her Majesty the Queen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Sorry, we don't usually get the opportunity, but I did want to ask, you spoke about the ANC now, and when you go home, you're
Yes.
going towards the ANC conference.
Yes, sir.
There are a number of important engagements coming up. One of them is the debate in Parliament on the Phala report.
Yes.
You have major plans going into, if you're re-elected for your second term.
Yes.
How are you feeling ahead of that debate, and are you concerned that this matter may lead to your premature removal from office?
No.
Because of the seriousness?
No, I think I've put my case forward, and of course, let us leave it to that panel to come up with the outcome, and we cannot prejudge it. I can't, you can't, and we leave it in the hands of the panel. So they are best placed to deal with this matter. So any form of speculation really is misplaced. Let's leave it to the panel to report, and anything else that flows from that, we handle then. And we've proven capable of being able to handle issues as they happen, and so let's leave all that to that process.
The debate?
The debate as well. I think the debate will ensue. I'm not a member of Parliament, so I will not be in the debate, and so they will be debating on the report, and whatever the report will be saying, they will debate it, and so let's allow all those processes. And the good thing with our country is that we follow due process. We are governed by the rule of law, and this is when the test of our democracy really comes to the fore. This is when the test of our constitutional principles are put on display, and everyone else must sit back and see how that whole process eventuates. So I am a great believer in our democracy, in our constitution, and I think let's all have faith in our democracy and constitution. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome.